Hi everyone, how you doing? Hope you're doing okay. It's a bit drizzly today, isn't it? Never mind. Anyway, so tonight's story I'm going to read you is Mr. Hoo-Ha's New Suit. So if you're sitting comfortably, then Nana will begin. Mr. Hoo-Ha's New Suit. Mr. Hoo-Ha was a little vain little gnome. He loved to have everything just a bit nicer than everyone else, so that he could boast about it. He liked to have the shiniest mackintosh, the biggest umbrella, the tallest top hat, and the most pointed shoes. He liked to have the biggest cucumbers in his garden and the highest sunflowers. He was that kind of person. Nobody liked him very much, and they used to laugh at him behind his back, but Mr. Hoo-Ha didn't know that. He thought that everyone looked up to him and said he was the smartest gnome in Fiddledy Village. But just wait a minute, Mr. Hoo-Ha. Pride comes before a fall, you know, so be very careful. Now one day the Smiling Witch thought she would give a party. Everyone loved her parties, for the Smiling Witch was a kind old dame and liked people to have a good time. She often asked the prince and princesses of Elfland and the Lord of Fifo and the Lady of Fum, so the folk of Fiddledy Village always put on their very best clothes when they went to the parties given by the Smiling Witch. When Mr. Hoo-Ha got his invitation card, he was most excited. I shall have a wonderful new suit made, he said to himself. Oh, a marvellous one. I shall be smarter than anyone else, and I wonder what I'll have it made of. I should like to find something quite new. I think I'll go off in the bus to the world of boys and girls to see if I can pick up anything there. So off he went in the bus. When he got to our world, he found it covered in white snow, for there had been a snowstorm the night before. Mr. Hoo-Ha stared at the snow in delight and amazement. He'd never seen snow before. He put out his hand to fetch it. It was very soft. Just the thing for my new suit, said Mr. Hoo-Ha to himself. Just the very thing, pure white. No one will have pure white, and so soft, like a duck's down. I shall be very smart and unusual this time. He took out his scissors and cut 3.5 yards of snow. He rolled it up and packed it in a bag. Then he caught the next bus back to Fiddledy Village and went straight to the tailor's. The tailor was surprised to see such soft white stuff. It'll be difficult to make up a suit, Mr. Hoo-Ha, he said. That's your business, said Hoo-Ha. I pay you for doing that, don't I? Well, just get on with it, and get on with your work, and then make me a fine suit, the finest you've ever made. The tailor did his best. It was really very difficult, for the needle slid in and out of the snow, and until the tailor had used a special frosty thread, he could not seem to get to sew the snow together. But at last the suit was made and delivered to Mr. Hoo-Ha's house. Good, said Hoo-Ha, turning the soft, shining suit out of the box. It's very good. It looks lovely. When the night of the party came, Mr. Hoo-Ha had a bath. Then he put on his vest. It was rather dirty and had some holes in it. For although Hoo-Ha was most particular about his suits and hats, he didn't mind very much about the things he wore underneath. After all, nobody ever sees those, he said. I can't be bothered to keep washing and mending my vests. So long as I'm nice on top, it doesn't matter what I'm like underneath. So even for the party, he put on a dirty and holey old vest. And then he put on his new suit. I can't say that very easily. You should have seen it. It was so soft, so white, and how it glittered. It was the loveliest suit ever seen in Fiddledy Village. Mr. Hoo-Ha put on his new white hat to match and went off to the party. How he twirled his stick as he went along, how he stuck out his toes, but the new suit was rather cold, and it made Mr. Hoo-Ha shiver. His nose turned blue with cold. His fingers could hardly take hold of the stick. It's cold night, said Mr. Hoo-Ha, his teeth chattering. The Smiling Witch greeted him kindly, and everyone else arrived. For Hoo-Ha always liked to come in last, because then, you see, everybody could see how grand he looked. Smiling Witch took him by the hand and led him to the fire. You are cold, Mr. Hoo-Ha, she said. Dear me, you're shivering. Come and warm yourself. What a wonderful new suit you're wearing. I've never seen anything like it before. It certainly is beautiful, and said everyone in wonder. Mr. Hoo-ha felt very grand. He turned himself all round so that everyone could see. Yes, he said, it's the very latest fashion. You ought to have some dresses made of it. Smiling Witch, it costs a lot of money, this stuff, but still it's worth it. Now this was a naughty story, for Mr. Hoo-ha had simply cut the snow off the ground for his new suit, but nobody knew that, so he went on boasting about it for all he was worth. He still felt very cold and stood in front of the Smiling Witch's big fire, warming himself all over. And then a strange and curious thing began to happen. Hoo-ha's lovely new suit began to disappear. It turned into water and dripped off him. You see, it was made of snow, and so, of course, the hot fire melted it. Mr. Hoo-ha looked down in surprise when he felt something dripping down his legs. Your suit's melting, your suit's melting, cried all the little folk. Oh, look! There was no stopping it. It went on melting until it was all gone. And there stood poor Mr. Hoo-ha in front of the fire, with nothing on but a dirty and very holy vest. Why don't you mend your vest? Cried a little folk in disgust. What's the use of wearing grand things on top when you're shabby underneath? For shame, Mr. Hoo-ha, look at your holy vest. You're nothing but a boaster, Mr. Hoo-ha. Go home and mend your vest. Well, that was the end of Hoo-ha's boasting. It was a long time before he went to a party again. But when he did, he went early and sat in the corner, and he wore clothes just about the same as other people, no finer and no smarter. And underneath, he was neat and clean. So you see, he had learnt this lesson. Poor Mr. Hoo-ha. Fancy having a suit made of snow. That'd be really silly, wouldn't it? I'm surprised it lasted as long as it did. Anyway, that was a silly story, but it was a good story. So that was Mr. Hoo-ha's new suit. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you sleep really well, and I will see you again tomorrow. I love you loads and loads. So night night, Atty, I love you. Night night, Torby Trouble, I love you. Night night, Ruby, I love you. And night night, Max, stop climbing on that sofa. I love you. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.